Before we cast off, promise me this. Watch the video until the end. The final reveal ties every whisper, every glance, every turn of the ship into one unforgettable landing. Chapter 1. A ticket not meant for you. I have always believed that the sea changes the truth the way sunlight changes glass. It doesn't break it so much as bend it into new colors. That is how it began for them, under skies so clear it felt painted, in a city where people practice love the way they practice their smiles, often, if not always well. Maris Vale, bright and crisp as a new envelope, was meant to sail. She was married to Adrian, whose business had grown tall and restless. She suspected, as some hearts do, not because she had proof, but because silence had filled too many rooms. So she booked a passage to South America, a long itinerary that looked like an elegant excuse for distance. She announced it calmly at breakfast, and Adrian offered a practice congratulations and a distracted peck, promising to visit ports if his meetings allowed. Then came the change, a sudden tilt of fate. Maris met Lila Moreno in a rented rehearsal hall above a florist, where the air itself seemed to hum. Lila sang as if every note were a promise made good. Her voice climbed into the rafters. It sat on the shoulder of anyone listening and whispered not to forget her. Lila was working nights for tips and daylight for hope. The arrangement that followed had the kind of logic only the wounded can see clearly. Maris proposed that Lila take her place on the cruise, using her ticket and name. The plan sparkled with risk. Maris would stay in the city, quiet and hidden, to see what Adrian did when he believed his wife was at sea. If he stumbled into the arms of someone else, she would know. If he remained faithful, no harm done. Lila would get a holiday, and a clean bed, and the odd thrill of being someone who had everything. Lila agreed because sometimes the ocean is the only door that opens. When the ocean liner wove its white smoke into the morning sky, Lila stood at the rail in a borrowed coat, labeled by another woman's name. She watched the small city of the harbor fall away and heard in her mind the tremble of Maris's last words. If you see the world for me, I might see my marriage for what it truly is. The heart of this tale, though, slipped on board in a darker coat and a quieter mood. Theo Danner was hired in a whisper by a friend of Adrian's, so the story went, to keep an eye on Mrs. Vale and report back if the play of flirtations grew too serious. A private investigator is a musician of doubt. Theo had learned to listen to footsteps behind doors and to understand how secrets breathe. He didn't know he was stepping into a duet. Chapter 2. The Investigator and the Song. Theo found Lila the first evening, as the ship trembled out of the Gulf's arms and into blue. She was seated at a small piano in the lounge, touching the keys like they were a letter she hadn't decided to send. She wasn't performing for the crowd. She was practicing remembering herself. He recognized the name on the passenger list and the posture of a woman trying to be watched and overlooked in the same breath. He had been told to look for elegance, reserve, and the diamond clarity of wealth. Instead, he found warmth. Her laughter came easily when the steward tripped, and she pressed an extra tip into the man's palm with a tenderness no diamond ever learned. The first words exchanged were harmless enough. He offered a compliment about the tune, and she brushed it away with a shrug. Her eyes were not the eyes of a socialite pretending at art. They were the eyes of an artist pretending at rest. Do you take requests? He asked. I only take those I can live with, she said. And you? I take the ones that pay my rent. He smiled at that, and she answered with a curiosity that reached beyond a game. They became ship friends. He watched from a respectful distance, sending off small notes to his employer that described a gracious woman occupied with music and fresh air. He found nothing scandalous to report and felt, for the first time in a long time, a job going wrong in the most human way. The trouble was not that she was unfaithful. The trouble was that he could not file her under any category but his own quiet interest. Lila was not blind to him. The writer of songs in her study understood motifs when they returned. The way he appeared on deck, the way he always found the same late-night tea, the way his questions were too casual by half. She took his measure and did not move away. Something in his attention steadied her. Being watched, she realized, has a different weight when the watcher means no harm. One night, a small ensemble set up by the starboard windows. Passengers swayed. Lila sang softly, the kind of tune you confess to rather than applaud. Theo stood near enough to hear the words and far enough to pretend he hadn't come for them. She sang of places the sea keeps secret and lovers who bring their hearts back like maps. He felt, not for the first time that evening, the beginning of an ache that could get a man in trouble. Chapter 3. Postcards and Port Calls. In port after port, the ship shed its stiff collars and brightened like a face in sunlight. In Cartagena, Lila bought postcards painted with boats so simple a child could have drawn them. She wrote to a city where she wasn't, signing each card with a name that wasn't hers. She wrote about afternoon rain and a cafe that tasted like oranges. She wrote because words sent over water can keep people tethered. Maris, meanwhile, kept her own kind of vigil. She hid in plain sight, renting a room across from Adrian's office and reading newspapers she never would have read otherwise. She watched him leave, watched him return, watched him pass the florist without a second look. She hated herself a little for wanting him to fail her, and loved herself a little for giving him the chance not to. Adrian, for all his faults, was not a villain. He was a man too practiced at being needed and not practiced enough at needing back. He arranged meetings and ate lunches and stared too long at the door of the jeweler's without going in. When a mutual friend told him a reliable investigator had agreed to ensure his wife's good time did not become headline fodder, Adrian nodded and handed over an envelope of careful bills, not to catch his wife, but to prove to himself that nothing shameful would be found. On the ship, Lila and Theo collected stories about other passengers. The widower who cooked in his head and made everyone hungry with his descriptions. The woman in blue who danced like autumn leaves. The child who slept in the deck chair, open mouth, trusting the ocean not to steal any dreams. All of it formed a kind of floating city, a place that held its own believable rules. When the ship anchored at a small island known more in postcards than in maps, Lila and Theo walked past sunburned tourists to a chapel painted the exact color of the morning. They did not go inside. Instead, they sat on the steps and shared fresh bread, tearing it in careful halves. If I say they were happy then, understand I mean the brave sort of happiness that keeps one eye on the time. Back aboard, letters crossed like rigs, Maris to the ship and to a woman with her name, Lila to the city where she wished someone would find her song, Theo to a post office box that only he had the key for, Adrian to the future where he hoped to deliver something that might explain what he could not say in person. Happiness makes people honest. Honesty makes secrets impossible to carry. So the sea, patient as a librarian, waited for the return of overdue truths. Chapter 4. Storm Warnings. The storm announced itself with little lectures from the wind. Chairs scraped, glasses trembled, and the captain's voice landed over the loudspeakers with a kindness earned by years at sea. There would be rough weather for a night or two. The ballroom, therefore, filled early. Dancers prefer the illusion of control. Theo found Lila near the edge of the floor, her fingers on the hem of a simple dress. She looked like someone bracing for descent, and he wished he could change the weather with a word. He asked her to dance. She accepted, because declining would be a cruelty she wasn't built for. They moved with the ship's sway. He was better than he looked. She was braver than she felt. Their conversation curled into the spaces where breaths are meant to go. "You're traveling alone," he said. "I'm traveling on behalf," she answered. "And would the person on behalf of you travel for you, if asked?" She smiled, and the smile was an apology for 1,000 things he didn't yet know. There are people who send others to see what they cannot stand to look at. I used to think the ocean could carry burdens for them. And now I think the ocean only reflects them back. A rattled window made everyone glance toward the dark. The band took the tempo down to a pulse. Theo, who had never been accused of having a musical ear for his own life, realized then that he did not want to get off this ship without telling her the truth. But he did not yet know if the truth would send her running or laughing, or both. He walked her to her cabin door, a corridor light flickering like a secret it couldn't hold. He might have said it then. Instead, she placed her palm briefly on his sleeve, the smallest pledge a person can make, and closed the door before promises flew out ungathered. Elsewhere, a slimmer storm gathered. Maris, tired of watching her marriage through fog glass, made a decision. She booked a flight to intercept the ship at its next major port, deciding that if truth would not return on its own, she would go fetch it by the scruff. Chapter 5. Unmasking at Midnight. Midnight came with a thinning of the storm and a thickening of the plot. The captain, who had a sense for such things, arranged a subdued gathering in the lounge. Less dancing, more talking. People drew their chairs into confessional shapes. Theo approached Lila. His decision landed and folded. "There's something you should know," he began, feeling how brittle the words might be. "Then tell me over tea," she said. "I am braver with a teacup." He told her in the simplest language he could find that he had boarded to watch her, to report on her conduct to a man who paid well not because he didn't trust his wife, but because he didn't trust himself to be a good husband without proof of her goodness. He told her that he had done his job badly, not with incompetence, but with disobedience of the heart. He had come to see her as someone he wished to protect from the very gaze he represented. Lila looked into her cup and saw a circle that could easily be mistaken for a ring. She did not throw the tea. She did not raise her voice. She asked him to listen, and when he nodded, she told him what Maris had asked of her. She was not the woman whose name he had read. She was a singer with a borrowed passport and an honest voice. She was traveling on behalf. They sat in the core of a confession so delicate that anyone leaning too hard on it would break it. And then the quiet gathered itself into a test. The elevator doors opened, and a woman walked in, carrying the jet lag of transoceanic resolve. She was precise as a punctuation mark. Maris had arrived. I wish I could tell you there was a firework of shouting. There wasn't. In the end, the truest collisions land softly. Maris saw Lila before Lila saw Maris, and I could feel each woman recognize the other. The one who had offered a name like an umbrella, the one who had worn it through rain. Theo stood just beyond the circle and understood his job had swollen into a life. Maris approached with a nod that was neither accusation nor absolution. Thank you, she said to Lila, as if thanking a nurse who had sat at a bed in the small hours. Did you find anything I should know? Lila shook her head. Only that the ocean tells the truth if you stay on deck long enough. Adrian did not appear with a bouquet and a speech. His apology drifted aboard the next morning in the form of a letter sent ahead to the purser's office. He wrote of a ring he had failed to buy because he feared it would look like compensation rather than devotion. He wrote clumsily, like a man learning to hold a pen left-handed. But he wrote, and sometimes that is the first architecture of repair. They met in a corner of the deck where wind edits everything down to essential verbs. Maris handed him back his fear and took his hand like a new student takes a new book. I will not promise you they were transformed into a perfect union. I will tell you they began again, which is rarer and harder and more faithful. As for Lila and Theo, their first argument was over who had lied more. They did not keep score long. He admitted he had decided, without the dignity of inquiry, that he knew her. She admitted that, out of duty to another, she had allowed herself to be known by a name that was never meant for her. They forgave each other not with speeches, but with sensible plans, real names, real addresses, dinners in real restaurants where the floor does not move. Chapter 6. Ports of Call, Hearts of Home. The last days of the voyage slid past like pages, almost memorized. People exchanged addresses and souvenirs that would become dust catchers with stories attached. The sea, satisfied, kept its larger secrets. Theo stood with Lila at the rail the evening before docking. The sun fell in sheets and made a city out of light. He asked her what she would do when they reached shore. I think I'll sing in a room that isn't moving, she said. Maybe in a place where the owner says my name correctly. And if the owner mispronounces it, he asked, then I'll sing louder. He told her he would close his case files and open a different kind of work. People will always have secrets, he knew. But he had learned something here that made him want to find the ones worth protecting rather than exposing. Maris and Adrian took their breakfasts on deck, trading small stories as if they were school children who had been assigned to write about their summer. Not every silence had been banished, but the ones that remained were companionable. When she laughed, he looked relieved. When he frowned, she reached across the table without thinking and smoothed the air between them. On the final morning, the ship nosed into the harbor with the modest pride of a job done. Passengers lined the railings, waving to people whose hats bobbed on the pier. Lila wore her own name like a ribbon now. Theo held her suitcase while she looped one last look at the horizon. There is a way the sea drops behind you when you turn inland. It feels both like losing and like putting something back exactly where it belongs. They walked down the gangway together, the kind of together that is not performance but possibility. I have told you what I know, that a borrowed identity can lead a person to their truest self, that a faithful heart can be obscured by noise but not erased, that music and weather and the gentle tyranny of schedules can take strangers and make them partners. Most of all, I know this. Love that survives a voyage does not promise calm seas forever. It promises that when the storm corners you at midnight, you will have someone at your shoulder who has learned the ship's sway and will not mistake the tilt for a sign to abandon. And if you ask me whether what began on the high seas endured in the city's complicated light, I will answer like the tide answers the moon. It goes and it returns. It learns the shape of the shore by touching it daily. It makes a map out of devotion and finds its way home not by sight, but by pull. They met sometimes at the harbor's edge, long after the voyage had turned into a story. Lila sang a song Theo had requested on that first night, and Theo, who had never been musical, kept time in a way a steady man can by standing close and listening closely. Maris and Adrian passed by once, fingers interlaced, arguing softly over nothing important, which is to say everything vital. A ship's horn sounded far out, practicing its own confession. The city caught the note and held it. The sea, I like to think, approved. If this voyage carried you somewhere true, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, give the video a like, leave a comment with your favorite moment, and share it with someone who believes love can find its way, no matter how rough the waters.